Too often, we judge others by their worst examples while judging ourselves with our best intentions. Welcome to Episode 1, Part 2 of How Being an Asian American Male Conditioned Me. This was going to be a two-part series, but after recording all that entails with my Navy experience, as well as my Vegas and poker playing experience, I think it's important to not only talk about the marginalization, how it affected me negatively, but also how, in contrast, I was able to learn how to leverage that to my advantage in poker and also my experience of living in Vegas. Vegas is also where I was living when the narrative about Asian males started to change, aka like when Crazy Rich Asians came out, and how that has continued until today. I know that there's a lot of people that follow me from the poker days, from when I used to be a personality in poker. And I do want to at least highlight a lot of that because there was a huge Asian experience, so to speak, in the gambling world. Gamble, as they say, babi jackpot, as they say in poker, if you guys know exactly what I mean with regards to the Asian rhetoric in the gambling world. But for this episode, I am going to go and highlight the Navy experience with regards to being Asian American. And in this episode, I'm going to break it down into three parts. How I learned what being naive and ignorant really meant in South Carolina, which is my first duty station. How diversity deferred and affected me at my next duty station in New Mexico. Diversity was a lot different, a lot closer to the West Coast to realize that diversity is a lot more prevalent, but there is still discrimination, marginalization, as you can imagine. And then the last duty station before I went to Vegas, which was San Diego, in which I would consider to be my homecoming because San Diego is as diverse with Asian people as much as possible. I will highlight some of the stories, some of the laughs, and for sure how my identity evolved throughout those times. But before I get into the episode, I really want to thank all of you who have reached out and shared your experience and shared similar experiences for which I've gone through. We're all working through something, and I just want us to normalize speaking about all of the issues that we go through and speaking about it vulnerably so that we can all level up together and also empower everyday people into their vision every day. Now, when you're conditioned to have everyone validate your identity, it's challenging to know who you are, and that became more prevalent for me when I joined the Navy as a nuke electronics technician. Joining the Navy and being stationed in South Carolina made me realize the difference between being naive and being ignorant. For the purpose of this episode, I'm going to revisit what naive and ignorant mean so that when I say these words, we're clear on what I mean and know that I'm not using these words as attacks, as it seems like ignorant and naive is being used on social media. And with that being said, I wish we would go away from using those words and weaponizing them because there is a lot of room for growth. There is a lot of room for learning as long as we take those words in the literal form and not in the sense of a deficiency as we've been carrying these out to be as of late. Naive is defined as the lack of experience, judgment, and wisdom, aka no worldly application to the said topic. And ignorance is defined as little to no knowledge, aka just don't know. You see how none of them talk about a character deficiency or a lack thereof integrity. I'm going to use those words for the literal meaning of what they say. It's important because even when I hear the word ignorance, I get triggered as well. And I know that I've been programmed and conditioned so based on how social media and people have used those words. But I want to at least use it for the sake of learning and being able to build upon the principle of what, if you just don't know, you just don't know, right? Now, mind you, this is also, going to continue with me being naive and ignorant to the culture of the South because I was raised in California. And if you guys know anything about Southern California and South Carolina, they're effectively two different worlds. California had every single culture. It seemed like every single piece of diversity. And South Carolina really didn't. Not only did South Carolina not have very many Asian people, if at all any, outside of the base, there's also a good bunch of people from the South that joined the Navy nuclear pipeline, all of which have never also met an Asian. Now, a funny quick story. I remember experiencing having to tolerate ignorance and people that are being naive when a kid asked me if I saw in widescreen. And I remember to this day, he's like, "Hey, Catherine, you ever see in widescreen?" And it was a legitimate question. It wasn't a diss. It wasn't a, trying to put me down. It was an actual question. And I didn't know what to do at the point other than literally tell him, like, no. And now, when the majority of people from the South who have never met an Asian person or had any kind of diversity in growing up, when the majority of their experience with Asian people is not the actual interaction, but also through media, where the media has for years marginalized us in media, movies, cartoons, how am I then supposed to expect them to act and humanize me when everything that they've seen hasn't? Now, this is also before social media was accessible as it is today. So although I believe, that they should humanize everyone, the reality is that the majority of them were just ignorant and really didn't know any better. Now, in the pipeline, there was what I would consider to be a lack thereof diversity. It seemed like the people that were going into the pipeline and the ratio of white people to any other minority was about 8-9 to 1. And in the initial class ups that I was in, I was the only minority, let alone the fact the only Asian person. And so when I got a lot of those comments, I started to initially kind of take them. But after a while, hey, I experienced my entire childhood of taking these kind of comments. Now I'm starting to get all of these comments from what I would consider to be a lot of passive, non-aggressive people. Like, who the hell are you to tell me anything? And this is when I started to develop my intolerance towards those comments. And it's interesting on how people choose to evolve based on their everyday surroundings. And with the comments I started getting again, I naturally developed a snapback response with my mouth, being able to say some of the most vulgar shit in response. Why? Because I wanted people to know if they made an Asian comment about me, there's going to be some extremely harsh comebacks coming back tenfold. And in turn, it made people respect me. I also learned that if I open myself up and make jokes about myself, not only would that diffuse the comments because you kind of take away their ammo, but it also got me accepted amongst the higher ups and my new peers that were white or that were, didn't know how to talk to Asian people, so to speak. What I didn't know was that this was the beginning of me deflecting my pain and anger into the form of condescending comments, jokes to others, and then continuous self-deprecation. I didn't know this then, but now, we are people, we are self-fulfilling prophets. And if we consistently tell ourselves some of these fucked up things, we're going to eventually end up believing it. And since we're built off of confirmation bias, we're going to find reasons as to why those stereotypes and stories that we tell ourselves are actually true. So I didn't learn this till years later, but it is detrimental that you understand what the language you're speaking to yourself as and making sure that you're not being repetitive to the point that it becomes a belief. Because again, we're self-fulfilling prophets. If you tell yourself you're a piece of shit, you're going to find reasons why you are and continuously put yourself down. Now, by the time I got moved to another duty station, I was just known as myself. With that being said, in my experience with moving around and experiencing diversity and going to new places, after about a year or so, after about a year and a half or so, you're just kind of known for who you are and not really by the labels. Now, people still say comments when they want to be funny, when they think they're being funny, or when they get pissed off and try to put you down. But I started realizing that the more and more I started getting these kind of comments, the more I just didn't identify with it. And there's also, again, me backlashing and saying some really fucked up shit. It's one of those defense mechanisms where it's like, hey, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you more. And in all reality, it might sound fucked up, but it worked. And in my opinion also, it's kind of like establishing a boundary for yourself where, hey, if you're going to do this, you're going to pay the price. And it happened on a regular basis. And as you can imagine, it caused a lot of animus and self-animus in me, because anytime you kind of project that negativity, regardless if it's justified or not, you're still honing into negative energy. Now, my next duty station was New Mexico, and New Mexico was a lot like an urban area of LA, and the people were similar to that of LA, except the diversity was a little bit different. Instead of being a multicultural everything, it was either black, white, Mexican, and the occasional native. Now, there was in New Mexico, there wasn't very many Asian people at all, unless you're like an engineering student or a math student at the University of New Mexico. There was so little Asian diversity that I had even got approached to being native, and I was asked on a couple of occasions of which tribe that I was heritage from. But again, that's just what you don't know is what you don't know. And this is also when, although their diversity was a lot more tolerated, now because diversity is a lot more tolerated here, the comments I was getting were, again, anytime I got an Asian comment, was to be aggressive, was to try to put me down in an attempt to get me upset. Now, this is when I started changing, in the sense of I started realizing that the majority of these stereotypes aren't me at all, so why am I getting offended? It's also at this point where I began seeing that even engaging into someone who defaults to racism isn't worth it at all. I mean, I still get triggered here and there, but it's leaps and bounds above what I was compared to what I was when I was a teenager. Back when I was a lot younger, I had a hothead, and every single thing that even resembled an Asian comment got me upset because of the persistence that I just kept taking. But again, at the end of the day, we're only responsible for our own emotions. And I realized that I don't have to be upset by something that I don't identify with. If someone's going to put every negative Asian stereotype and throw that in my face, and I don't even know them and they don't even know me, why am I getting upset? And this in itself started to evolve my identity into just myself instead of just a label. Now, in New Mexico, I started getting the same exceptional Asian comments. Hey, you're exceptionally Asian. You're this, and this for an Asian. But this is also when I decided to start reframing that. Instead of saying, yeah, I'm an exceptional Asian, and people, when people be like, hey, you're not like most Asians, I'm like, you're right, I'm just me. And that in itself started becoming really empowering, because at that point, I didn't know it, but I was starting to create my own identity. I started dressing a lot nicer, dressing for myself. Instead of trying to dress into a trend, I started dressing to what felt right for me and how I liked appearing. I started working out, except I started working out to start feeling good about myself, and started working out to be healthy, and started watching what I eat because of healthy, not because of an impression or getting out of a label or of a labeled identity. I was doing it because these things started resonating with me. And then after a couple years of just investing into myself, understanding that, hey, this is, my identity, but my identity is something that I shaped to myself, I eventually got stationed in San Diego, where for the first time in my life, I lived in a city where the majority of the population was Asian. It was also the first time where non-Asian people can identify me as Korean instead of just being Asian. Now, what this enabled me to do subconsciously is actually just finally be really proud of who I am with regards to the labels and the identity. I actually started dating Asian women, and they started to become a preference for me with regards to dating and being intimate with. And to the point where I even dated a Filipino and a Chamorro for about a good year and a half. I also want to point out that there's so much Asian diversity and so much of an Asian population in San Diego, where Asians actually discriminate against our own kind. If you guys aren't aware, there is a distinction between Asians, what they call the UCA, upper class Asians, and lower class Asians. It is a really aggressive manner for which we try to marginalize our own kind. I know I keep referring it to that, but I don't know how else to explain it, but upper class Asian people are the ones that are more stereotypically successful in the sense of Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. And lower class is everything else that doesn't fit into those three. And so while we're talking about marginalization and we're talking about it from just American culture, within the own Asian culture, we do it to ourselves. And that's something that people don't talk about very often. Now, in San Diego, this is also when I started finding my passion in poker, and even opted to do my last 3 years in the Navy recruiting in Las Vegas. And just like any new place I was stationed and located in, the stereotypes of being an Asian male still existed, especially in the poker world. Except in the poker world, the narrative about an Asian person is significantly different. We're known as the wild card. We're known as the crazy guy that does all the action, or the one who just outsmarts everyone. And with this being said, this is where I started to then leverage the stereotypes that were against Asian people. And I ended up turning a lot of those narratives into profit and for money. And yeah, that is going to be on the next episode, where we're going to talk about how to leverage all of those images of yourself into a profit. And then also how I was able to leverage that against human other people, because poker is a big psychological game. Yeah, there's cards, there's hands that make hands, but very rarely do you have both hands showing up and you see how much is to the river. If you guys don't know what I'm saying about, I get it, poker is not everybody, but the next episode is definitely going to be for the people who have followed me since the poker days and since the Vega days and the degenerate days, so to speak. So thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you guys want to watch the first episode, it is literally on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast. And then, yeah, email me if you guys want to connect. I love you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. I love you. Have a great week, and deuce.
Thanks for listening. If you're interested in working with L&K and ShiftEQ, go to calendly.com/ShiftEQ or email him at shifteqllc@gmail.com. You can also visit the website at shifteq.org. Thanks for shifting in. Until next time, shift your soul, shift your body, shift your world.